Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michael Harris, and I'm going to present to you a PowerPoint presentation on project management case studies, and this one is titled The New CIO. This is a question as to a company called Rose Industries who were in dire need of some revamping. They have been in business for quite some time, but they have fallen behind the times, and they were looking for some entity to come in and audit their current systems and see if they could put into place something new that will keep them afloat. Um, this company is a type of company that likes to hire from within, uh, so they grow their own, so to speak. And a gentleman by the name of Mr. Green came in as an auditor so that they could look at ways to make this company a little bit better. Now, Ralph Williams became the CEO, and his background basically was he started off in the mailroom, and after 5 years, he made his way up to management. And then, in a short 10-year time span, he became the CEO. And he understood what was going on with the company. So that's why he came in and brought in a gentleman by the name of John Green, who was a 20-year veteran with the largest IT consulting company in the world. So his resume comes in highly reputable, and he's a well known person in the industry. But they had some issues, and so we have 11 questions that were posed uh, into why the success or why the failure of this company was imminent. And the first question was, why is it so difficult for Rose Industries to implement project managers prior to Mr. Green coming in? And like I said earlier, Rose Industries was built on an old school belief of grooming from the ground up internally. Uh, they weren't so keen on bringing in outside people to come in, um, and the company did not believe in external training, which means they were not paying for their employees to go out and get an education, an MBA, or nor did they offer tuition assistance for their employees. The company executives are also, they were just kind of stuck in the past and did not believe in upgrading. Now, if you wanted to go to school or if you wanted to attend a seminar, the company had some internal seminars that they offered, and they provided their employees with 7 opportunities a year to go to some type of internal training. A caveat to that is that some of the educational institutions outside of the company, because of the company's unwillingness to pay for their employees to use company time or paid time off to go during the weekday, some training institutions offered programs on the weekends. So the question that was posed is, can inbreeding be detrimental to project management maturity? I believe first and foremost, yes. So when you groom your employees from the ground up and you do not allow them to seek further education from outside sources that you're going to pay for, then they will utilize the patterns that they know only from the company from which they grew up in. So if you live in a plastic bubble, the only thing you know is what's inside that bubble. Many people outside a company with degrees and different experiences can bring a value added option to a company. But if you lock everyone in, they will never know that there are other alternatives out there that can make a company thrive. And I just use an example, which would be North Korea, and how secluded they are in this world, and how their defiance will lead to their demise. So, if we looked at Rose's current level of project management maturity, which is not much, how long might it take them to see some reasonable project maturity, assuming Mr. Green was not there? Well, one of the first steps that they did was identify that there was a problem and a solution was needed. They hired Mr. Williams to come in and audit the company and look for changes. Mr. Williams brought Mr. Green, who was a well known person that could affect that change. He offered a 2 to 5 year plan that either would or could turn the company around. But the senior leadership, as usual, did not buy into that plan, and thus he resigned. I think the company, without outside intervention, will fail and go out of business in the long run. I'd like to offer another example of that. Is I experienced this situation with a company called Lion Workspace Products back in 2014. Um, I'll get more into that as one of my final notes uh, at the conclusion of this presentation. So, as we move on, the next question that was posed to me was: is it possible for an executive or for anyone else to determine the true challenges of the job at hand during the hiring process? And, subsequently, what questions should be asked? Well, for me, during the hiring process, it is up to the interviewer to look for the right persons for the job in accordance with its need for the company to succeed. The person being interviewed for the job should ask questions like, what is the company's vision in the next 5 years? And maybe what changes is the company looking to do in the next 2 years? This kind of gives that person being interviewed a little foundation or basis on what is expected or what he's about to get himself involved in. Uh, on the outside, one cannot assume or assess the true challenges in the interview process because it's a one-sided interview, and you're only getting their side of the story. You need to get in and get your feet wet and ascertain what the true facts are. So during the interview process, they're going to tell you what they want to tell you, and it's up to you to go in based on your expertise, your knowledge, your background to go in and do what it is that you're hired to do. If it's to audit the company, to come out with some true fact finding solutions. And once again, with Lion, they brought in a third party to look at the operations of the company, and some results or some recommendations were made, and they too opted not to go with the recommendations, and the results were not so good or not so favorable. So, as we move on, the question posed was, how does one know that during the job interview process, if the promises made for support will be kept? Well, the short answer to this question is that no one knows in the beginning that the promises will be kept. It's one of those things where the honeymoon process, or the courting process, if you will, they're going to tell you everything that you want to hear. And that goes both ways. The interviewer and the interviewee are going to say things that you want to hear. But then again, sometimes the truth hurts. And like was mentioned in a famous movie, you can't handle the truth. And that's what the outcome of the recommendations by Mr. Green turned out to be. But once there is a recommendation for something to be done outside the norm, then there is a chance for resistance to surface. And depending on the loyalties of those on the inside, support for that new guy may be diminished. And that's exactly what happened. The old heads, if you will, from the company decided that, they probably said, who is this guy? He doesn't know anything. Why this and why that? We don't need this. And I don't know why you even came up with that. And, he met with much resistance. And if I can, just interject the same thing, that Lion offered support to all of its employees and said that their jobs would be secure. But that was not the case, and many people with over 35 years working at that facility or working for that company were let go abruptly. And that was during a process similar as to what Mr. Green was set out or tasked to do. So he asked me, was Mr. Green correct in his 4 components of a good project management culture? Well, that question cannot be answered with certainty because his program actually never made it to fruition. The executives chopped up all four of his components and basically told him to get lost. Subsequently, he tendered his resignation 2 weeks after being hired so as not to taint his reputation. Uh, I would say that he did make an honest attempt based on past practices that he has been associated with that could have made a positive impact on this company. But we'll never know what the outcome would have been because it never happened. And you ask, was Mr. Green too optimistic in his approach? I would say I don't think he was too optimistic. I didn't think he would expect the leadership to be so pessimistic about his recommendations because during the interview process, he was promised that he would get support from the executives and everyone based on whatever his recommendations were going to be. Uh, like I said, Mr. Green is a world renowned consultant with over 20 years of experience, and his resume proved that he could take a failing company and turn it around and have it going into a more positive direction. He could not expect that culture of the company would meet with so much resistance. He probably thought it would, but I don't think he expected it to be just a complete washout. Um, and it appeared to be that his plan seemed to be very simple or very basic and easy to follow. So, if it was so easy to follow, why were the executives threatened by his four-step approach? Well, first and foremost, I think that they were locked into the only knowledge that they possessed collectively as a company. Um, when you get kind of sucked into just the status quo of something and you don't allow for outside entities or anything to come in, you fail to see that something is broke until it's too late. Um, and because of this, this sheltered lifestyle that the executives and the leadership lived, they felt intimidated by someone with a stronger knowledge base than they. And he came in with his guns loaded and they shot him down. They were so bound by the limited education that they possessed that they felt that they were the smartest people inside their company and that they didn't need anybody's outside help. So you ask if Mr. Green had decided to stay, how might he have changed his approach given the responses by the other executives? Well, there are a few approaches that he could have taken in lieu of the executives' resistance. One of the things he could have modified the four big steps and maybe put it into a 10-step uh, approach to help ease the transition. Some people like a 10-step program where there's small little things over a period of time. But then he could have taken those four approaches and he could have used people from within the company to train them to the standard of which he wanted to implement for the company. Um, he offered two PMOs. He could have streamlined that and put one. He could have used a third party system development package versus making the company identify and invent basically their own development package. And he could have used internal employees or one of the executives to manage the company's portfolios as opposed to hiring someone else to manage it. With all that being said, the purpose of his hiring was to fix a broke system that apparently the existing personnel could not or would not do. He had a limited time frame to get it done, and the support was not there. Excuse me. So, was Mr. Green correct in resigning from the company? In my opinion, I would say yes. He is one of the best in the industry for turning bad companies around, and he was not going to let this company diminish his reputation. He believed that this company, without his assistance, would fail. And what is my prognosis on Rose's chances to remain in business? Well, from my point of view, if they take any of Mr. Green's recommendations into consideration, they can survive. They may look for another consultant to come in and offer a recommendation which they may be more comfortable with. But the bottom line is that they at least realize that something needs to be done. And if they stay the course on their current path, then they are headed for a path of destruction. One can only hope that they would want to stay in business. So, as a final note, I just wanted to add the reasons that I spoke of North Korea and Lion Workspace products. Um, I added them because I felt that they fit the profile of this company to a certain extent. North Korea is stuck in a time warp, just as Rose is. And because of their sheer stubbornness and isolation from the rest of the world, they do not know a better way of life that can ease their pain and suffering inflicted by their ignorance. They are headed for self destruction. And if they do not change their ways soon, and their closest friends are already angry, and they're starting to look the other way. And I've worked for Lion Workspace products a few years ago as a project manager. They went through the same type of scenario as Rose did and brought in a third party to audit them. The third party made recommendations, and subsequently, Lion did not accept the changes. And within a year, they were faced with filing bankruptcy. This sent the community in Aurora, Illinois, into a tizzy or frenzy, as many people who worked there for generations. Lion's been in business for over 110 years. They were being laid off during the time that the United States was in its own recession. So it was a terrible time for the storage industry and a terrible time for those people who I worked with who had been there for years and years, who were abruptly fired, basically, and had no other place to turn to. But a gentleman by the name of Gene Berg, his story is he was sitting on his yacht somewhere reading the USA Today paper and saw that Lion Workspace had filed bankruptcy. So he got together with two of his friends, and they put their nickels and dimes together, and they bought the company outright. We had a team meeting, or everybody came in to Indianapolis, Indiana, and he promised there would be some minor changes in the manufacturing side, and that he was going to streamline that piece, and that resulted in quite a few layoffs. There maybe 110 people laid off initially. The outside sales force eventually took a hit as well, as we had 140 outside sales reps that got cut in half, and they were laid off. They did a realignment, and they went through a second round of cuts about 6 months later, and further streamlined the company's employee numbers. And then a third round of cuts came, and that's when I got caught. I made it to the third round and was cut. But I was happy to be a part of the good, the bad, and I could see that they're hanging in there for now. I speak with some of the people who are still with the company on a regular basis, and they're struggling, but they're still kind of making it. And I'm not bitter. I have a lot of respect for them, and I appreciate that Gene Berg put his life on hold for a while to help save a manufacturing company and save jobs for hundreds of people, even though we lost hundreds of people at the same time. Well, this concludes my presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to come to you today and speak to you. I hope you have a happy Valentine's Day and a great and prosperous 2016.